Hi, guys, and welcome to the podcast. You probably know me at this stage, but my name is Andy. I'm the clinical lead here at ReadyCare, or the chief nerd, as my wife likes to say. In today's session, we're going to look at something a little bit different in a sense. So I'm usually kind of looking at the sciencey side of things and talking about, safe, slow, effective weight loss. Not necessarily slow, but kind of safe and paced weight loss. One point I want to be very clear on in today's session, we're looking at how to lose 7 pounds in somewhere between 7 and 14 days, just to drop a good bit of weight before your holidays. Now, the point I want to make is this is intentionally extreme. I'm not saying that you should definitely follow this kind of advice indefinitely going forward. Personally, I do. This is genuinely the way I eat, just to keep kind of body fat levels down. But I've intentionally set it up to be a bit extreme. So let's jump into it. I won't keep you long. We'll do about 10 minutes. If anyone has any questions, get ready to pop them in now. So if we look at the science is overwhelmingly clear. We know exactly how to drop body fat. It's really, really crystal clear. You lower your insulin levels. And you lower your insulin levels by recognizing which foods elicit the highest insulin response and so dialing those down in the diet. So the foods that elicit the highest insulin response are probably in the same amount, in the same kind of to the same degree, sugar and dietary carbohydrate. So just to give someone a quick kind of a recap in case you haven't been listening to or are new to our sort of way of thinking and our science of the last few years of low carb. Carbohydrates are all metabolized as sugar in the body. So whether you have a can of Coke or you have a bowl of cornflakes, there's actually not a huge amount of difference in the total volume of sugar that ends up in your blood. Now, the can of Coke is going to hit your bloodstream quicker. It's going to do more damage to your small blood vessels. It's more likely to make you diabetic. But ultimately, you end up with large volumes of sugar in your blood, whether you eat dietary carbohydrate or sugar, in both scenarios, albeit they enter the bloodstream at a different rate. So the reason I'm saying this and the reason this is important to point out is when you have sugar in your bloodstream, so you've had sugar or dietary carbohydrate, your pancreas, which is an organ that just kind of sits in behind your rib cage, secretes a hormone called insulin, and the main job of insulin is to store fat. The main job actually is to lower your blood sugar levels. One of the consequences of doing that is that your body goes into fat storage mode. So we know now that the foods that cause weight gain, bread, rice, pasta, cereals, fizzy drinks, ice cream, all the usual stuff. Basically, as a patient of mine has said, just think anything that tastes nice. So any of those sort of foods. And it makes sense if we look at the rates of diabetes and obesity in Ireland. I think we're second in Europe for both, only behind Malta, if I remember correctly. It makes sense because if you think of our diet, it's a real high carb, high processed food diet. From frozen pizzas to potatoes and cereals and porridge and beer and Guinness. It's a high carb diet. So here's my tip number one. If you want to drop 7 pounds in a couple of weeks, we have to dial down carbohydrates in the diet. Ideally, lower than 50 grams of carbohydrates a day, which is known as ketogenic. So my first tip is this: do not ease into it. You'll hear people saying this all the time. I'm just going to cut out bread for the first week, and then I'll eventually tip away down, and I'll get rid of cereal. Then I just have some cereal to get rid of. This is intentionally extreme. So what I want you to do is, if you want to drop 7, 8, 9, 10 pounds in a couple of weeks, dial down carbohydrates completely. And remember this, because this is a really important point. You do not require any carbohydrates for optimal human health. In fact, you can make a very strong argument that if we all gave up eating carbohydrates and sugar, there'd be little or no chronic disease. So don't ease into it. Don't do the whole, I'm just going to, relax at the weekend. This is intentionally extreme. I want you to do whatever amount of time you have between now and your holidays to drop the weight. For me, it is, when I say drop it, I just want to knock down maybe 4 or 5 pounds off the midsection as opposed to anything else. So if you want to do that, make sure you dial down your carbs as low as possible. So for me, and this is just for me, this is not advice that I'm giving to you necessarily, I go what's known as carnivore. I go 0 fruit, 0 vegetables, no carbohydrates at all, maybe 1 or 2 grams in trace amounts from what's known as glycogen in meat, which is the muscle stored version of glucose. I'm going to go with what they call BBB, bacon, butter, BBE, bacon, butter, and eggs. So I'm going to have bacon, butter, beef, and eggs, triple B and an E, and nothing else. That's just me personally. So the reason I'm doing that is because I don't even want to have raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, the lower sugar fruits. I don't want those spiking my blood sugar levels and storing body fat. I want to bring it right down. Now, if you want it to be extreme, but not as extreme as that, you could go meat, eggs, dairy, and berries, and nothing else. Meat, eggs, dairy, and berries. Now, again, you're going to lower your insulin levels. You're going to get quite a big drop in weight if you haven't done this before, because you're going to have loads of fluid coming out, which is a good thing. Once you keep your electrolyte levels up or add some salt to your food or something like that. Okay, first focus, don't ease into it, dial down your carbohydrate intake. Second focus, and you're going to do that by having beef, bacon, eggs, butter. And then adding into that, if you want to be a little bit more relaxed, but this will still be quite a lot of weight loss that you get from it, strawberries, dairy, raspberries, nuts, all that sort of stuff. So again, focus on carbohydrates. The second thing I want you to focus on is your meal frequency. If you dial down your meal frequency, you'll basically trigger your body to burn fat. And your body will say, okay, so glucose levels are low, insulin levels are low. We have ketones available, which are just fats broken down. You've probably heard of BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate. And your body would say, well, I can burn the stuff that you're giving me from the eggs and the avocado, or I can just burn body fat. I can easily mobilize body fat and burn that as my energy substrate. But it will not break down body fat if you're tipping away with nuts and eggs and avocado and snacking on cheese and having a little bit of bacon. You want to give your body, you want to prime your body, this is known as metabolic signaling, to use the fuel source that you have on board as opposed to seeking exogenous food. And you do that by fasting. So basically for me, again, if I really want to quickly drop 4, 5, 6 pounds of body fat and do it in a couple of weeks, personally, I would go down to 1 meal a day. That's what I often do. I'm not doing it at the moment, but I do 2 meals a day at the moment. For me, it's around 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock are my meals. I don't snack at all in between them. Snacking, for the most part, once you're fat adapted, is a psychological. You're doing it from a psychological point of view as opposed to actually needing to eat. So there's Dr. Donald Collins, who's our UK lead over in the UK, where we treat patients in primary care networks. So in primary care in the UK, has a great saying, and that is that if you wouldn't eat a can of sardines, you're not properly hungry. So what he means by that is, and even if you do or don't like sardines, it doesn't make a difference in this analogy, because if you are properly hungry, like you really needed to eat hungry for the sake of energy and true physiological hunger, you would eat the sardines. If you wouldn't eat sardines, or if you wouldn't eat a breasted chicken, you wouldn't really want a breasted chicken. You're looking for amusement, you're looking to be entertained. And I say that with respect because I do it all the time. So it'll come around, I'll have my I'll have a big enough meal at 12 o'clock. For me, it might be like bacon and eggs or a stir fry or something like that. It might be 2 or 3 gluten-free sausages, 3 or 4 eggs, a couple of rashers, something like that. I'll have that, and then around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, my brain will say, oh, I'd love something to eat. And if I ask myself the question, am I actually hungry, or am I just looking for entertainment? Am I looking to have, feel nice, basically, which is a totally different thing to actually being hungry. That's not true physiological hunger at all. So in that instance, I tend to ignore it. I'll have a black coffee, and I say to myself, sure, it would be nice tasting something. And that's a point, actually, that it frustrates me sometimes when people say, oh, I had a bar of chocolate at 3 o'clock, and I say, why? And they say, because I wanted one. And that kind of acting on impulses without any real pause for thought is a dangerous place to be in when it comes to food. So, I mean, if you were to eat, and if I or anyone else was to eat just whatever came into my head, I would definitely eat pizza and ice cream all day long. I'd love it. And chocolate and Coke, and I'd love it. It'd be great. But often your brain will ask you for stuff that you don't need or want, and could lead you to an early death as well. So minimize your meal frequency. So for me, that's going to be, if I'm in the next couple of weeks, if I want to drop 3 or 4 pounds before I get really extreme, because I'm not away on holidays till the middle of next month, I'll probably go with black coffee in the morning, maybe with a little bit of cream. Then I would have my lunch at 12 p.m. I'd have my main meal at about 5 to 6 p.m. and I won't eat again beyond that. I just have a Ballygowan bottle of sparkling water, something like that, cold sparkling water, that I have, 7, 8 p.m. sort of a thing. Occasionally I might just have a cup of tea or something like that, and put a little bit of cream in it so I'm not spiking my insulin. That's minimizing your meal frequency. Now, for me, if you're already fat adapted, and this is what I am, so this is what I'll do, I'll go down to 1 meal a day for about a week to 10 days before I go in, which is doing ultimately 23.5 hour fasts, 8, 9, 10 days in a row. Speaking of fasting, do fasted cardio workouts. So in the time when you're in a fasted state, ideally as deep into that fasted state as you can be, prime your body to burn more fat by getting out and exercising when you're in that fasted state. So again, for me, this would be, if I'm not eating till 12 o'clock, would be going out for a walk around now. Anytime in the morning actually would be good. Get out, go for a walk. It doesn't really matter what exercise you do. And also, a lot of people get this wrong. When it comes to burning fat, not calories, no, it's a separate matter altogether. When it comes to burning fat, you will burn more fat on a walk for an hour. This always blows people's minds because you have to go through graphs to explain to them. You will burn more fat walking for an hour or close to it than you would running for an hour. You will burn more calories running for an hour, but those calories will come from glycogen and carbohydrate and glucose being burned up and so on. You will get fitter running for an hour for sure, but from a fat substrate utilization, strictly speaking, how many grams of fat did you burn? Walking is almost as effective as running. Now, that's not the same thing as saying that they both burn the same amount of calories. They don't. So in the running scenario, you might burn 500 calories. I'm just using broad figures here, sample figures. You might burn 500 calories running for the hour. You might only burn 250 calories walking for the hour, but 200 of the calories when you're walking will typically be from fat, and maybe 180 to 200 in and around that of the 500 calories when you're running will be coming from fat as well. This is really important. Walking is really, really effective for fat loss if you're in a low insulin environment. What that means is if you're not eating a lot of carbohydrate and sugar, your body will burn fat quite easily. I saw a really pronounced example of this where my brother John, who's he does Ironmans and stuff like that. So he'd been exercising for years, and I'd say he was around, I don't know, 13.5 stone-ish, 13.5 stone, and holding a little bit of muscle mass. He did nothing to his exercise regime and just switched from carb fueled, so carb loading with pasta and rice and all that sort of stuff, to being fat adapted. And he was probably, I mean, he was in okay shape, but he didn't look like somebody who did Ironmans. You know, he was, like I say, about 13 stone and 6 foot. And I'd say he's probably 11.5 stone now and shredded. No, when I say shredded, I mean like Ronaldo shredded. He's in ridiculous shape. Veins in your abs kind of shape, like too shredded. Did nothing different, didn't change his exercise regime, nothing at all. Just gradually happened. So what happened in that scenario was the exercise he was doing was way more effective because his insulin levels were low. So his body was free to burn fat as opposed to requiring glucose, energy gels, carbs, all that sort of stuff, pasta, rice, bananas. So fasted cardio workouts was the point there. If you get up in the morning, you're in a fasted state, typically I'll have a black coffee and I'll go for a run or I'll go for a walk. If you're going for a walk, prolonged exercise at a low to moderate intensity is really good for fat burning, which is basically a brisk walk for an hour would be really, really good. Or you can also burn a lot of fat doing something called interval training. Interval training will work because it's for a different reason. Post-exercise oxygen consumption, POCS or something like that. Okay, the last thing is consider longer fasts. If you're already fat adapted, and if it's not a problem for you to get up in the morning, have a black coffee, eat nothing until 2 o'clock, and then eat again at like 4 o'clock, and then wrap it all up so that you're doing like a 22-hour fast every day. Do that. The real strange thing about doing these fasts is once you get a decent amount of time into the fast, often hunger completely disappears. So myself and my wife Natalie will often do, not often to be fair, sorry, but we will do like 48-hour fast every couple of months. And when you get into the second day, it's the weirdest feeling ever, where I'll wake up on the morning of the second day, so I'm like at least 24 hours in at this point, and I'll forget that I fasted the day before. Like I'll have no idea. I'll just completely, until I think back and go, oh yeah, we didn't eat anything yesterday. So you would think that there would be a kind of a linear increase in your hunger levels, but that's not what happens at all if you look at the research. Your ghrelin level, which is your hunger level, goes up and up and up, and at some point when you kick into full fat burning, it just flatlines. It goes down a little bit and then it just flatlines. So you don't get kind of exponentially hungrier as you go on in fasts when you're fat adapted. It actually dulls down. And there's a lot of people who've done 7-day fast, 10-day fast. The longest one is 380 something days, 382, I think, the guy back in the 70s. Don't do that because you'll have a miserable holiday. But consider longer fasts. Just keep an eye on your electrolytes, add salts into a bit of water and drink it back, or have chicken broth or something like that. That would be good. Okay, so just to sum up, I'm not saying to do this all the time. Not that there'd be anything wrong with it, but this is intentionally extreme. Do not ease into it. We haven't got time to ease into it if you're looking to do a 7 to 21 day blast here and just stick to these principles rigidly. But you will drop somewhere between 7 and 10 pounds, no problem if you do this. The main thing is keep an eye on your carb content. For me, I'll knock out all fruit, all vegetables. I'll just go carnivore, which is going to be meat, eggs, dairy. If I'm trying to ease up a little bit, I might have some strawberries once a day or something like that. I might even have a small bit of dark chocolate, but I would keep my carbs no more than 20 grams personally. Less than 50 would be great. And then minimize your meal frequency. So from a fat burning and longevity point of view, there's a lot of evidence emerging at the moment that what you eat is less important than when you eat it, which sounds crazy because I would never be, and this is an extreme example, but I would never have thought, someone eating pizza, ice cream, chocolate could be just as healthy as someone eating healthy foods if they had the same eating window. I still don't believe it, but there is a lot of researchers, the likes of Gabriel Dossi, just looking at the fact that if you narrow down your eating window narrow enough, you can get away with a lot more actually. And David Sinclair, the Harvard longevity researcher, has done a paper. Now, this is done on a mouse model. It's done with mice, but it shows that mice that ate absolute crap for 20 minutes will live longer than mice who had a relatively healthy diet, but were eating 4 or 5 times a day. So just narrowing down that eating window as small as you can is going to help a lot. So don't ease into it. Really drill down on carbs. Minimize your meal frequency as much as possible. Do fasted cardio workouts, and then if you're comfortable doing it, do longer fasts. One thing to look out for, if this is something you're new to, is in the first 7-day period. If you haven't gone low carb before, you will likely lose a lot of weight, and some of that will be water weight. With water comes sodium, and sodium is responsible for electrical impulses in the brain, so you might get a little bit of a headache. If that happens, bone broth or an OXO cube, just get an OXO cube and mix it into hot water, let it cool down a little bit and drink that. That will replenish the lost electrolytes and get rid of the headache. Okay, a couple of questions. What about cycling, fat or calorie breakdown? Depends on the intensity that you do it at, Akhil. So basically, if you're doing cycling and you're sprinting, you're going really hard at it, you're likely going to burn more calories from glycogen. So how it actually works is really interesting. Is in relatively lower heart rates. Let's say, for example, someone is fit enough and the resting heart rate is somewhere between 55 and 70. At heart rates between kind of 90 and 110, they burn the most fat. When they go way up into the higher heart rates, they're burning more from glycogen. So if you're sprinting on the bike, you're going to burn less fat, but you burn more calories, ironically enough. But if you are going at a lower intensity, you're just kind of tipping away and breaking the sweat, then you're going to burn more calories from fat. Hi, Michael. I swim 3 mornings a week, usually 1 kilometer, 1K min in around 1 kilometer minimum in around half an hour. Is that a good fat burner exercise? Would it be better than a similar walk? Yes, it's going to be, I would argue, probably a little bit better than the walking. That's definitely going to be a good fat burner. So the key thing when it comes to fat burning, guys, is if you look at the research, what's really interesting is that exercise is not particularly good for weight loss. As a general rule, doesn't matter the exercise. If you look at groups who exercise intensely, moderately, low versus groups that don't exercise at all, but they're both following the same diet, over a 6-month period, the difference in weight loss is around 1 kilogram. It's actually not significant at all. That's not to say exercise is not effective. It's incredibly effective. It's amazingly good for you for preventing diseases and cancer and neurological disorders. It's good for your mental health. It's good for your immune system, everything. It's just not great for weight loss. So I would put most of my focus on the diet. Dial down carbs, do as much fasting as you can, minimize your meal frequency, keep stress to a minimum. But to answer your question, Michael, yeah, swimming would be good if you can do that in a fasted state and do it at a pace that's kind of comfortable to you. That's going to be super. Okay, I'll leave it at that, guys. Best of luck and enjoy your holidays if you are going away. Don't forget to like this video. It just keeps us up higher in the algorithm, and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any upcoming podcasts. Have a good day. Enjoy the nice weather, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.